Guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Limp, and I'm here with one that I'm coming back to you with it again. This is Fields of Fire. This is third edition, the deluxe edition that GMT was nice enough to send to me. It's one of the first games that GMT's ever sent to me, so definitely appreciate that. And I've been talking to them, going over it, learning about the game. We got more Fields of Fire coming up soon. I'm actually very much looking forward to that, but I've covered Fields of Fire before. Now I did that when I was very, very new to the game, very not to the game, but to covering games, to reviewing it, and wasn't as good, didn't have as good of equipment, didn't do as good of a job. Then I do a much better video now, which thankfully I do get to actually update now that they've done this deluxe edition of the game. But I wanted to come at it fresh, right? I really wanted to hit this fresh. And thankfully, with brain injury, everything's kind of new. Because one of the big improvements that they've done to this game is the learning experience. Because I loved the first edition. I really enjoyed it. Thought it was one of the best games that I ever played that accurately simulated the transition of orders down from on high down to the actual troop level. And they had a couple editions I played before, the first one, which, World War II-esque, and then the Marine version, which I absolutely loved. I'm kind of kicking myself now because the deluxe edition doesn't have the company gunny, and I love the company gunny because company gunny is awesome. But yeah, all of that to say that, yes, I'm going to be reviewing the game, but I'm also reviewing it based on how the improvements they've made have affected the game. So we're gonna go down the table, take a few looks at some of the components. GMT game, the components are great. It's really not even in question. How the game plays, all that new stuff with it, and then we'll come back here and we'll do some final thoughts. All right, so here we are down at the table. I've got a game of Fields of Fire set up. This is actually their example game they put in one of their little playbooks here. The standalone mission example of play is in this book. I'm using the standalone mission because it's one of the easier ones to set up, but you could really use any mission as a standalone mission if you really wanted to. Really, all you need is the enemy order of battle and what comes from it, and whether or not you've got a static setup for the terrain cards or if they're randomly placed. You can play them in any order you want. It'll just affect the difficulty a little bit. For a proper experience, though, you're going to want to do the campaign. Start at the beginning, work your way through, do the experience, the whole nine. Now, forgive me on the light; it might seem a little wonky. Part of it is I'm having to really diffuse my light. I'm having to throw it everywhere, and it's because the components are actually quite good. The cards are very nice, but if I use my light the way I normally use it, it reflects off the card so bad it looks like there's light coming up at the camera. So I have to throw it out to the sides and have it bouncing back. So there's going to be a little bit of shadow. Now, I spend a lot of time talking in the review later on about the learning aspect of this game, but I'll go ahead and address it now for those who don't watch entire videos. Learning Fields of Fire now is much easier than it was previously. It really did feel like you were banging your head against a wall the first time I tried to get into this game, and this was many years ago when it first came out. And it's nowhere near that level of difficulty. They really have done a wonderful job making this game much easier to approach now compared to what it used to be. But I'll address that further on in the video when we get into the review aspects. For now, we're going to focus on the gameplay itself. So what you see that I have set up in front of you is a set of terrain cards. Some of them are face up, some are face down. The ones at the bottom will always be face down. These are referred to as your staging area. This is basically where your units are going to start. Think of this as kind of out of bounds, right? Enemies aren't going to come there. You're not going to attack out of there. There's never going to be any volumes of fire coming from it. All of that's going to happen up here. But it gives you a spot to kind of tuck your guys into before they start moving forward. In the example of play mission, I do not have full knowledge of the terrain. I have some of it placed face down. In this case, I can see all adjacent cards, so all the front row will be automatically flipped face up. And if you can see all the way through it, Then you can reveal further up cards. In this case, I have an open field on top of a hill, and you can tell which ones you can see through by the borders on the cards. It's actually very simple. If it's white, you can see through it. If it is dark green, you can't. You can always see adjacent cards, but you can't see through a green barrier. So, for example, you see some of these have white and green. So, if we had someone over here in this gully draw, it's green and green rather at the top and the bottom, white at the sides. So you could see through the adjacent cards, but you couldn't see through this card top to bottom. So if we had someone here, they could see someone all the way over here in the farm over in this card because there are white borders here in this hedgerow, so they can see right through that. So when it comes to Fields of Fire, you can basically think of these cards as your hexes. You will move into these and conduct fire. Now, the cool thing about these cards is you don't just move onto the cards and then keep moving along. You can actually move within the cards, and that becomes even more pertinent in later on missions, and especially Vietnam, where you have cards that have buildings and courtyards in them that you will move in between within that card, the different areas of the buildings. And just to show you what I'm talking about with urban warfare, I flipped over here to the rulebook. So you can see there are different types of terrain cards. So some will have complete buildings on this. Now that is going to be game dependent. So in the rulebook, it does talk about marine units, for example, but there are no marine units in this version. So there are multiple versions of Fields of Fire, and some have marine, some have army, some have different eras, some have different locations, and there's some modern stuff coming. Hint, hint, wink, wink. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so what all does this mean? What are we doing? What's going on here? Okay, you see all my units lined up in my staging area, and I've got one specific player aid placed over here. This has to do with command and control. Okay, so spread out in throughout all our different units here are command units. For example, we've got a CO HQ. So that is our company HQ, but it's not just him running everything. For example, here is 1st Platoon HQ. And there are other HQs throughout there. So there's an XO, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Platoon. There's a tank one in there because I added tanks to this to show as an example. And there's also a 1st Sergeant in the mix. No company getting, sadly enough, no company getting, but there is a 1st Sergeant in there, so we're close. So they are represented here and here. So there's a physical representation of them on the battlefield, but you're going to control their orders over here. All right, so what do I mean control their orders? Well, across the top here, I've got counters that represent how many commands are available. So let's say we are doing the first bit. You'll start pretty much top rank, work your way down. So our company HQ would be the first one. There is a deck of action cards that you are going to use, and they are going to determine how many orders that commander gets. Now, the commands that he gets, if he uses them properly, he will disseminate them down through the leaders of his company so they can activate their subordinate units, and it's more effective doing it that way rather than the company's HQ, the CO, trying to go and order the individual squads. He's not going to be out there, well, a good leader is going to lead from the front, but he's not going to be out there ordering the individual squads. He's going to order the platoon commanders, that platoon HQ, and give them orders, which causes them to get their counters coming down here and issuing their own orders out. So just to show you, I'll just grab a random card here. We've got 4 and 2. We're going to look here at the top. Now, one of the cool things about the Fields of Fire cards is that they are everything to this game. There's no dice. There's no other counters. There's no drawing anything. It is these cards. They do it all. They do hit checks. They do random numbers. They do you hit whether calling on artillery or a grenade strike. They do your armored combat. They do your commands. They do your everything you're going to do in this game. These cards. And it's really, really simple when you get used to these cards. Up here at the top, this is our commands. This is what we're going to look at. If you were operating in the sequence of play and you were operating properly, you're not doing the initiative. And I shouldn't even say proper because you're only going to have so many orders. So some people are going to operate off of initiative. Looking at our little sequence of play here. And for a sec, let's ignore the event and the defensive mission aspect. I am going to be playing a example game to show you guys some of how it is all played, but this is basically the review and showing the components. So friendly command phase, right? We're activating battalion. Battalion is possible to be on the board, but if not, generally you're going to be activating your commander, your company HQ. So he's going to draw his card. He's going to get his orders. He gets 4. That's only if he's in communication with higher. So he has to be in his chain of command to receive these orders. If he isn't, then he doesn't get his orders, which means no one down below him is going to get their orders, and they're all going to have to operate off of that initiative rather than their activation. And the initiative, whenever I refer to initiative, is the smaller of the two numbers. So there's the big number in the helmet and the smaller number down below it. The smaller number, the one down in the little star, is generally going to be lower. So you don't really want to operate off of initiative. You want to do the activation. So you want to be in communication with higher. Our company commander here gets 4 orders. Boom. We bring his counter down. He's got 4 that he can use, and he can save some of those orders for the next turn if he doesn't need them all, depending on his experience and all that good stuff. Generally, for our example, we're going to just consider everyone as line experience. Now, visibility does come into play as well. There are missions where it's nighttime or it's dark or bad weather, whatever's going on. For now, we'll just go with line experience and clear weather. So it gives us our general run-of-the-mill orders that we can save. In this case, it is always going to be listed down here at the bottom of how many orders that can be saved for follow-on turns. So when you get these orders, that company HQ, if he's in communication with the units underneath him, he can issue them orders, and then they get to draw their own cards and start bringing their counters down. And this is where you're going to start actually activating your units. Okay, so our company HQ got 4 orders. Well, let's say he wants to give an order to activate 1st platoon, 2nd platoon, 3rd platoon, and sadly we don't have enough to activate everyone. We still have a company HQ out there. We still have a 1st sergeant out there, and we still have our tank leader as well, our tank HQ. In this case, we're going to activate 1, 2, and 3, and our tanks just in case we need them. That means all of the lower level units that are not being activated will only be able to operate off of their general initiative rather than activation orders. So again, looking back at our player aid over here, our company HQ has issued his 4 orders. 1, 2, 3 in the tanks, okay? Boom, 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 boom. 4 orders are done. So we flip him over to activation is completed. And now we can bring down the ones that we are going to be activating next, which are these. This leaves us the XO and the 1st sergeant who can take initiative, but they do that after these units have all done their own orders. All right, so we draw 4 cards. Now, normally you're going to do this one at a time, but I'm just doing this rapidly to show you guys. So we draw 1 for 1st platoon, and then we do all his orders. We draw 1 for 2nd, do all theirs, 3rd, and then the tanks. Tanks got a very bad card. Did not work well for him. So we got 4, 3, 3, and 1 orders. Now remember, like I said, when you are activating these guys, you're going to do this one at a time. So you would activate that 1st platoon, have him issue out all his orders, then draw the card for 2nd, then draw the card for 3rd, and then the same for the tanks. Now, something to keep in mind, again, like I said, these can be modified based off of experience, based on contact level, based on a number of different game events, can cause your orders that you get to be modified. Things like your commander being under fire can cause him to get a reduced amount of orders. Right now, they're all in their staging area, so there's no modifiers that's going to kick in, so they're just going to get those base values. And I hear you going, okay, Gimpy, well, you've got orders for these guys, but they're still all sitting on their cards. But supposedly 4 orders have been issued out, and no one's really moved or shot or done anything yet. And you're right. But this is when things really start kicking in. This is when your commanders are going to start ordering their units forward to start doing a little reconnaissance, a little hooking, and a little jabbing. But you're going, okay, well, what can they do? Well, they can do a lot. There is a player aid that is foldable. Look at this thing. It's freaking huge. Huge player aid of actions that you can take with your different units. Now, all units can't take all actions, but this is the general run-of-the-mill actions that you can take. Tells you what it is, whether or not there is a draw involved. When it says auto, that just means you automatically succeed at it. Who can originate the order? So some things can only come from a certain level of commander. Maybe it has to come from battalion or a company HQ. Maybe it comes from any HQ. It just depends on what type of order is being created. So something like this that we see on the inside of it, move to an adjacent card, that's an auto. So that just gets ordered. Whenever HQ issues that order out, any good order unit that is not marked as exposed happens when you move your units, can carry it out. And what I like about this player aid is it lists down all the different orders easily, what the draw is, how many orders it costs. Sometimes it can cost more. For example, to move an entire platoon, it costs 2 orders, not just 1. Who can do it? Who can receive it? And then it spells out what's happening and any little addendum. For example, moving a unit to an adjacent card causes that unit to become exposed. Now, we're not going to go through all of those orders, but I want to give you an example of what you could do in certain situations. So let's take our first platoon here. Nobody's moved. We don't have any reconnaissance. We don't know what is up here, but we know because there's potential contact markers here that there is potentially enemies that can be found on these areas. Depending on the letter will determine what types of enemies you can encounter. A, B, and C being the different markers, with A being the worst. Now, just like in your little player aid here where it lists down your order of battle, so it'll tell you all the different units that you can bring into whatever mission that is you're playing. The force package is basically the order of battle for the enemy. These are the units that you can potentially run into on your mission. So for this example mission that I have set up, these are the things that I can run into from these potential markers. You see down here at the bottom, it's the type of contact, so A, B, or C, and then a random number. So different contacts here can appear depending on what the letter is, and some contacts can't even appear. So for example, with a C, we don't even get 8 or 9. 8 or 9 isn't a possibility, which is a good thing for us because that's pillboxes and a main defensive line, which is a bunch of enemy units. Also, just while we're here to show you guys, it has a contact location. So sometimes it will depend. It'll tell you to put them in a certain distance, certain place. This will tell you where that's going to be. So as an example, with those 4 orders that I have for my first platoon commander, well, I want to find out what's going on. I know there's a farm over here, so I want to send some units that way so I can find out what's going on. I could send a whole squad, but maybe I don't want to risk a whole squad. Maybe I want to send just one small little group of guys to do a little reconnaissance. Well, you can detach a team. So as a order, I can flip first squad of first platoon over to its reduced side, and I can take a fire team and break them off and issue them an order to go forward. Now, I could send orders into any of the adjacent cards, which are going to be the cards surrounding. So I could send units over here, I could send units here, I could send units here with first platoon. But right now, I just want to peek the farm. I want to see what's going on there. I'm only going to risk 1 step rather than 3. And depending on what happens, I can react to it later. Now, keep in mind, though, this is the staging area. You cannot shoot from the staging area. So if they do run into an enemy contact here, you would have to deal with that by moving units forward. You could not take and stay basically safe back here in the rear and fight them off. Whenever you move a unit, they are going to be marked as exposed. that will get them a modifier. It is not a good modifier. That's a -2 combat modifier. So basically, if they're attacked, they get hurt worse than they would have otherwise. That really sucks, but that only stays for the first turn. So at the cleanup phase of this turn, all exposed markers are going to be removed. Now, I've also flipped the 2 cards farther on because this fire team can see these cards as well now, so I know what type of terrain I'm going to have there. Like I said, most missions you're not going to have to worry about that. You will know what the terrain's going to be beforehand, but there are going to be some missions where you're not going to know and you'll have to expose it as you go along. Now, since I have a unit here and a potential contact marker, I can go ahead and resolve this potential contact marker. That is a C. That means I will go to that force package over here and I will draw a card and I will look down at this little table to see what it is. So let's draw a card and we are drawing out of 10. So down here at the bottom of the card, it's got numbers 2 through 12. Think like a 2d6 roll. You will look at whatever number in the green that you're basically rolling out of. We're rolling out of 10. We look at number 10 and we got a 7. Over here, 7 to 8 on 10 for column C or potential contact C is package 4. Package 4 is a machine gun nest. Oh no, not good. Enemy machine gun, light machine gun team. They will place a field of fire. They will not be spotted and they will be at max line of sight and range per the contact location table. Contact location tables down here. That tells us where they're going to be. So left, front, or right. That means they can go there, there, or there. We will draw one more card. And we're doing this out of 5. 5 gives us a 2. 2 tells us it's going to be direct front. So we will place a machine gun team in foxholes in direct front. All right, just to show you real quick, these are all the counters that I have drawn out. I've got an unspotted counter because they are unspotted. PDF because they are putting out some fire. Foxholes because they're in fire. And there is our little combat team. So we'll place them there. And we still have a potential contact there. They are going to be in a foxhole. So we'll place the foxholes. They are going to be firing on my units, and we will mark them as unspotted. And since I just realized I did not explain what the things at the bottoms of the counters mean, I will go ahead and grab up a couple so I can explain that real quick. I should have done that earlier. My apologies, but it's okay. We can take care of that now. Looking at our counters, the number of dots at the bottom center is how many steps. The more dots, the more guys that are there. This is going to be anywhere usually between 1 and 3, 3 being a full squad. So you see here, we just got our little fire team that we broke off, and here's a light machine gun team. Besides the dots, you're going to have a picture of whatever it is, and then you're going to have letters on either side. The left side is what type of fire they put out. The right side is the distance they can put that fire out. So it's either going to be point blank, close, long, or very long. And that's just how many cards that they can fire. Point blank is on the same card, close is adjacent, long is a couple of cards, very long is 3 cards away. So these guys can put out long range fire. They can easily hit us. Now, the sad part about this, the PDF is double-sided, so it can go both directions, but they are unspotted, so I do not get to open fire at them. Since there's now enemy fire coming at me, it is A fire. A fire means automatic. So I have to place an automatic volume of fire marker here on the counter. And actually, excuse me, I'll put it down here at the bottom. And that's just something that they say to do, and I definitely need to stick with that. I put the ones that hit my guys down here at the bottom, the ones that hit their guys at the top. But keep in mind that volumes of fire generally are going to hit the whole card. You can't pick and choose. So if they're your guys and enemy guys in the same card and you open up with a machine gun team, you're opening up on everybody. You don't get to just, hey, I wanted to shoot the bad guys. It doesn't work that way. can kind of happen that way because there are cover markers, so you can fire at cover markers. Cover markers being things like the foxholes that we have placed here. There can also be buildings or just generic cover, and you can fire at those. That is specifically targeted. But if you're just generally firing at the card, you're going to be hitting everything that's in the card. Now, looking at our volume of fire, you see this puts out a -1. That's the modifier that is going to apply to my guys when they are effectively shot. So these markers mean you are being shot at. Bottom left has to do with fighting infantry. Bottom right has to do if you're attacking a vehicle target. I'm not going to get long-winded on vehicle targets. I'm not going to explain every nuance of the game, but I am going to play through a few turns in a follow-on video. So if you want to know the more intricate rules of the game, make sure you guys stay tuned for that one. This is just a brief, trying to be brief overview, but it's probably going to be at least an hour video because there's just so much going on over here. As you can see now, we have issued an order to our first platoon, his first order. He was activated by the company HQ. Company HQ spent that order to activate 1st, 2nd, 3rd platoon and the tanks. When 1st platoon activated, he drew a card. He got 4 orders. He has used 1 order to issue 1 fire team forward, and now we have created this scenario. So that's all from a single order. Now I can respond. I still got 3 orders. I can do other things. I've got a whole bunch of other guys down here I can do some stuff with. That's the very basics. It does get much deeper than that. There's a lot more going on. I can't tell you everything because I would get extremely long-winded. I just wanted you to have an example of issuing orders and how the gameplay works in that regard. But understand that right there, what I just did, getting the orders from over here, translating them to a unit, and causing the units to move forward and interact with the enemy is the basics of the game. That's what you are going to do. You are going to use things like your squads, your machine gun teams, your mortar teams. Your mortar teams can put in indirect fire. You can have offboard artillery, so you can call in fire missions. You can have your tanks move forward. They put out a different volume of fire. Things like mortars or bazookas, Panzerschrecks, tanks, they all put out different forms of that volume of fire, those VOF markers. There can be anything from automatic, small arms, grenades. Grenades kind of mix into a lot of things like mortars and Panzerschrecks and whatnot. There can be heavy volumes of fire, and you can do things like crossfire. So you can, or concentrate fire is one, and you can also get crossfire. I can't find my marker for it right now. I have to grab it here in a sec. But if you have fire coming in from more than one direction on a unit, they can have crossfire coming in, and that counts as a modifier. You can concentrate fire. Certain units can concentrate fire and get a bonus to the type of penalty they're taking. Generally speaking, it's a game of modifiers. You want to get the maximum amount of volume of fire on your enemy while keeping them at the worst modifier. So trying to catch them out in the open when they're exposed, when they're out of cover. And then you're going to want to reduce the penalties to your guys. You see my fire team here is in a very risky position. They're not completely out in the open. They are at a farm, so it does give them a bonus. But by moving, they were opened up on by a machine gun team that spotted them. They are now exposed, which gives them that -2. They've got automatic fire that's coming in. That's going to be a -1 on top of it. But thankfully, with them being in the farm, there's the +2 modifier up here at the top of the card. Generally speaking, that's the name of the game, moving your units forward so you get the most advantageous tactical position and expose your guys to the least amount of enemy return fire. Of course, you're not going to know what you're going to run into because it's going to just depend. It's all going to be random based on these potential contact markers that you run into. But as you can see, this is not a game that plays quickly. This is one that you're going to have to make sure that you're going slow and you're taking all your steps. All of this was just from a single order to the 1st Platoon HQ. Now that all this has happened, like I said earlier, can respond to what's going on. I can now do things like infiltrate movement because there's a volume of fire marker. So I can try to get my units to move onto this card into a covered position. Maybe I want to try to take and toss mortars in, or offboard artillery. I got to try to find a way to neutralize this machine gun team. Maybe I want to move some units over here. I've got some machine gun. Well, I did. Evidently, I moved them. I've only got a tank on this left card. I could move a machine gun team over to this card from here and have them try to shoot down at the top of the hill on them. Of course, that would require the enemy unit to be spotted since they are unspotted. And like I said, everything is going to be done off of this action deck here. Depending on the action that you are wanting to take, again, it's either going to be automatic or it's going to be a draw. For example, things like spotting are going to require a draw. So you will flip over a number of cards to see you did spot the enemy. And actually, now that I just remembered, I forgot that was supposed to be a draw. It was not automatic. I looked at the wrong thing. A and B would have been automatic based on our contact level. C was not. I should have drawn 4 cards for C. And for example, let's just do it real quick. Drawing 4 cards, you're looking over here to see if it says the word contact. So we'll say that this is our draw for it, and we did have contact. If you try to move into cover, down here at the bottom of the terrain cards, it lists the number of cards that you can draw. So if we wanted to move our fire team into cover, we would issue them an order to look for it. And depending on what terrain they're in, they will draw a number of cards looking for certain things, looking for it to say cover, looking for a concentrated fire marker, looking for an explosion marker for calling in offboard artillery. Everything is done off of this action deck, and I can't like it more. It's busy. The cards are busy. There's a lot going on these cards, but once you understand what you're looking for, it really becomes streamlined. There's no rolling. You're not rolling anything. You're simply drawing cards and looking for the correct symbol. And just to show you very quickly before I run out, let's say I had moved a unit forward and it got shot up, it got chewed into pieces. You can have units break down into a variety of different, they're called LATs, limited action counters, limited action tokens. Things like this, that's a casualty. Basically, someone got killed or gravely wounded. Litter team is wounded, so they need to be brought back, or they're paralyzed. And all units that do take a hit of some sort will become pinned, which, like everything else, is a volume of fire marker. So any units that would be hit, you would mark them as pinned, and that changes their own volume of fire. Now, like I said, I'm not going to keep showing you every single aspect, because if I did try to explain the entirety of the game, the video would be 5 hours. There's just so many little moving parts, but the game is not hard. The game is not hard. When I first played this game, I thought of it as a hard game, a difficult game to get into, and I no longer think that. Yes, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of little steps that you need to make sure that you're checking along the way. Even here, when I'm doing my example, and I'd mapped this out before I started, I still forgot to draw for C because there's just so many little steps. So it's not that the game is difficult. It is that there are just all those little moving parts. But if you work the problem, just go at it slow. Boom, boom, boom. Make sure you follow the steps, especially follow along with the sequence of play. You will not have a hard time with this game. They have done a very good job of updating this system into one that is much easier for everyone to get into than it used to be. As for the rest of the gameplay, like I said, I'm going to have a follow-on video where I'm going to continue playing on with this mission that you guys have seen. Now, I've thrown a couple of random objective markers. I've got one here in this 3rd row, and there's one more way back there in the 4th row. Make sure you guys watch that, because that's going to be the one where I really get into more of the finer details. Do all the different types of fire, small arms, automatic, heavy, grenade, incoming, all that good stuff. Do some anti tank, and pretty much anything that is vehicle related in this game is referred to as anti tank. It's not necessarily tanks, sometimes it's aircraft, sometimes it's jeeps or trucks or whatever, but they call any vehicle combat anti tank. But I will show you guys that when we do our example of play video, because like I said, there's just so much going on with this that I can't get it all into a single review video in an efficient amount of time. But for now, you do at least have a good general concept of how Fields of Fire is played in the basic grasp of how the system works. Not all the fine details, because there's quite a lot. But like I said, you'll see that in the following video. Let's go ahead and pop back up to the top so we can do some final thoughts on the review. All right, so we're back from the table. You guys have got to see some of the game and the components and all the nice stuff that comes with it. Now, when it comes to the final thoughts, the review of it, I'm going to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. One is the improvements that they've made to it, and then the gameplay itself. You know how the game is. When it comes to the improvements, I've got to say all of that is just excellent. They really buckled down and focused in on what needed to be done to improve it. Because I went back and I watched some of my old videos on the game and what was going on with it. And I remember when I first learned the game and was first trying it out all those years ago, that I dinged it because I thought that they had rated it too low on its complexity. They had rated it equal to a game like oh shit, I'm brain farting out now. The Age of Sail game. Anyway, uh, they rated it equal to that one, and it really wasn't. Fields of Fire was much, much more difficult. And now it's not. The rule book, I have sat down with it and I've gone over it, and then I've dug into their player aid components and the learning games. I filmed one of those for you guys to show you how you're supposed to use that additional resource now to be able to learn the game. And it wasn't the slog that it was the first time through. When I first learned this game, I mean, it was, you felt like you were bashing your head through a wall to learn it. It was not a fun experience. You wanted to get through it as quickly as possible because you just had to. You had to learn how to play it, but it wasn't an easy thing to do. It was uh, almost college. I always use this when I talk about some of these rule books. It felt very much like a college textbook in the way that it was laid out, and it was not an easy read. And I think that was the biggest problem Fields of Fire had when it first came out, was it wasn't written as much for the layman, you know. And I'm not saying that to, you know, hate on it so much, but a lot of the people who were involved in the design and the experience and making the game and everything that we're talking about, very well educated people who have war experience, who have officer experience, who know what they're talking about, right? So these guys are very well experienced, but I don't think they did the best job then of translating that knowledge that they wanted to down to the player, right? There was that barrier to entry that was very high. This is a vast improvement over the previous one. Now, it's still a little difficult, right? It's still Fields of Fire. It's still the same game, but this was nowhere near the beating that first one was. This was much easier to read. The flow was just accurate, right? It was written in such a way that you flowed from one subject to the next of what they're trying to impart. So it was a build up, right? You were slowly climbing that mountain rather than facing the wall and just having to scale it, right? And hope for the best. You didn't have to have that just sheer 90-degree cliff. Like, oh my God, how am I going to get over top of that? This was a slow build up, and it gave you multiple different options on how you could climb that mountain. And I really have to commend them for those learn to plays that they included. A couple of different ones, not just one, but a couple of them that give you that ability to, like I showed in my first video on this, that you'd play a segment, just a small segment of the game. You'd read a small segment of the rulebook, play that little bit, and it taught you how the command structure worked. And then the next part would add like, the volume of fire, how that's going to work, and then add this and add this and add this. So you slowly built up to it. And if you didn't need that, if you could just sit down and read the rule book and play it, great, good for you. If you needed that the extra material, now it was there. And it's just so much easier for everyone to get into this game than it was previously. And the way I always judge these rule books is the same way. I believe that anyone should be able to sit down with it, read it, learn it, and figure out how to play it. Someone who has never played a war game before needs to be able to pick up your game, read the materials, the learning materials that you have, and be able to play it. That's not me saying that every game has to be easy or not complex or anything like that. No, by all means, make them complex. Give us some real deep gameplay. But you shouldn't have to have a wargaming background or the war college background to be able to understand the game and the information that's being provided to you. And I talked to them about this, and they did tell me that they had got multiple playtesters, and they went out and got playtesters who had no experience. They got people that did not know wargaming to sit down, read it, learn how to play it, and have them help them develop it. They got the noobs, and that's what they needed. They needed a noob to be able to use this, all the learning stuff that they had available, and to be able to learn to play the game. I think they really nailed it this time on eliminating that just high barrier to entry. And now you have a complex game, a game that is still Fields of Fire. It hasn't changed, but that barrier to entry has now been vastly reduced. And like I said, that was the biggest thing that I harped on the first time. So they really tackled it. I have to give them 100% props for doing that. So on those bases alone, Fields of Fire is absolutely worth getting. Now, when it comes to the gameplay itself, my opinion has not changed. Just very quickly on the gameplay, because I'm getting a little long here. The gameplay is excellent. The gameplay is phenomenal. I love all the different aspects. You have a vast amount of gameplay available to you here. 3 different theaters, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam available to you. Sadly, there are no Marines in this box. Hopefully, they'll do a deluxe edition of the second one that has Marines, because we got to have our company gunny, because it's God, country, corps, company gunny, and then everyone else is below them. But the gameplay itself is still just as good, still just as phenomenal now as it was then. You really do have to be able to make good choices with your command structure, and you have to worry about all the little different aspects. Now, of course, there are some learned plays in there. There's some example games where you can cut out some of the more complex things if you need to, like ammo tracking or lines of communication. And I can, first game, take that out. Take the experience out, definitely. Take the ammo tracking out. Maybe just focus on that communication aspect, laying your phone lines, making sure you got radio comms up, right? Stuff like that. And then you add in those extra bits later on. That way you're not getting hit with it all at once. But it's got so much going on. And for me, being a commo guy, that's what I know. I know some of this equipment. I use some of this equipment. So to see it accurately being used in the game is something that I really like. I disagree with some of the radio stuff, and they even mentioned in there that they have to abstract it to a point, because radio comms can speak farther than is really being abstractly shown in the game. Now, World War II radios weren't as good as the stuff that I was using, not by far, but the Vietnam stuff definitely could to reach out and touch someone. But anyway, you could get a set of orders right, and if you use these orders correctly, let's say you get 4 orders for your CO, your company CO, that company CO is not going to take those 4 orders and go down to the individual man, the individual fire teams, and say, hey, you go left, you go right, and we're going to go. No, he's not going to do that. He's going to disseminate those orders down to his XO, down to his first sergeant, down to his platoon commanders, right? And by taking the orders and putting them in their hands, now those HQs, those commanders get to activate instead of using their personal initiative. Their actual activation gives them more orders. It means they're being used in a more efficient manner, just like you would expect in real life. Yes, a platoon commander can operate on his own initiative, and in the Marines, everyone's supposed to operate on their own initiative, but it's more effective if there is someone up above with that grander view of what's going on across the battlefield, disseminating that information down. And that is represented in this game in the fact that you have more orders to use if they are being passed down correctly through your chain of command. So if you have that company CO that has those four orders and he passes them down, let's say he puts it down to the squad level, well, he may order four squads, but had you use the orders correctly and pass them down to your platoon commanders, well, now you could activate all the squads. So you could activate 9 squads and some machine gun teams or some mortar teams on top of everything instead of just those individual men being activated. That's what this game accurately simulates. The fact that you want to do that correctly, but you do have the ability for initiative because it also simulates the fact that there's some fog of war, there's some communication issues, so you're not getting the same amount of commands each turn. That's going to vary a little bit. You have to use those as effectively as possible. But there is that general initiative to simulate the fact that your individual commanders will do some stuff on their own. They're going to react to a point, but it's not going to be anywhere near as effective as actually operating in unit cohesion with all the commanders working together towards that singular objective. Everything else, when it actually comes to the combat of the game, is stuff that you were going to expect to have in any war game. Setting up smart maneuvers, right? Setting up crossfires with your squads, being able to catch that enemy out in the open or when they're exposed, not exposing your own guys, using reconnaissance, sending a small skirmisher force forward to find out what that potential contact is. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's an artillery strike, or maybe it's an 88 team, maybe it's machine gunners. You don't know. But if you send that small force forward, you're risking a smaller amount of your force instead of all of your guys just being mauled out in the open. And it gives you a chance to go, okay, well, now we know what's there. We can try to move into cover and advance in such a way as to not risk our men to the incoming enemy fire. So the game itself is you using your orders to react to whatever pops up. And you've got multiple different types of missions. There's offensive missions, there's defensive missions, there's patrol missions, patrols where you'll have like a smaller subset of the company that you're going to use to just kind of poke around at the enemy, see what's going on out there. For me, one of the things that I liked that stood out for me was the missions where I didn't know the terrain, right? Some of the missions it's going to tell you what the terrain is. You're going to know that ahead of time. But I like the ones where the cards are face down, you randomly shuffle up and put them down beforehand, and you have to react not only to not knowing what type of enemy units you're going to run into, but also what type of terrain you're going to find. So you can't plan beforehand where you're going to go for cover or for blocking lines of sight. You're going to have to figure that out as you're moving forward. And especially if you're incorporating all the different aspects of the gameplay into it, the communication, the ammo supplies, the experience of your units. If you're using all those different things with the game, it can really provide you one hell of a rich experience because there's just so many variable choices that you can make that no two missions are ever going to play out the same. It's always going to be random what enemies you're going to encounter. You're going to find mines, you're going to find machine gun teams, you're going to find those anti-tank guns. Are there going to be enemy tanks? Ultimately, when it comes down to Fields of Fire, you guys know I like the game. I've talked about it multiple times before over the years. It's always been one of my favorites. When it comes to wargaming, when I say war gaming, I think of Fields of Fire. I think of Unconditional Surrender, right? Many GMT games are some of the ones that I think of fondly when I think back to my beginning days of wargaming. And to see them come out with a deluxe edition now and as a good a job as they've done with it, I really just couldn't be happier. I think they've done just a phenomenal job. And I am looking forward to spending some more time with this one. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.